I saw my wife's lover hand her a wedding ring during the company dinner. Time stopped. The clinking of cutlery, the muffled laughter of colleagues, the celebratory toast, everything became a distant noise, an almost imperceptible echo in the face of the scene unfolding right before my eyes. It was impossible. But there it was, right there, in front of me. Their hands touched for seconds longer than necessary. Her gaze glowed, not with the tenderness of years of marriage, but with something new, something I recognized immediately: desire. Complicity. Something that no longer belonged to me. My stomach turned. My fingers closed over the glass, my jaw locked. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. Betrayal. Not suspicion, not fear, but the raw, unforgiving reality of betrayal. This wasn't a passing flirtation, it wasn't a mistake. It was a pact. A commitment. An alliance. And it wasn't mine. The shock immobilized me, but soon the blood boiled in my veins. I looked around. Nobody seemed to notice. Everyone laughed, toasted, celebrated. But there, between the two, a parallel universe unfolded, where I didn't exist. A universe where the woman who slept next to me every night accepted rings from another man without even hesitating. I swallowed hard. What did that mean? How long had they been together? Was it a symbolic gift or a statement? Why here, in front of me? Did they know I would see? Did they want me to see? A wave of nausea washed over me. I was betrayed. But worse than the betrayal was the humiliation. The ridiculousness of being deceived in front of everyone. The silent contempt in the way she held that ring, the discreet smile on her lips. I felt small, I felt stupid. How could I not have noticed before? How could I have become this pathetic man who helplessly watches his wife being snatched by someone else? But there, at that moment, something changed inside me. The pain gave way to something bigger. I could walk out of there, cause a scene, throw her against a wall of questions that would never have honest answers. I could confront him, punch him in the face until that damn smile of conquest was erased. But none of that would give me back what was already lost. I needed to be cold. I needed to be smart. I wouldn't be just any betrayed, I wouldn't be content with the role of the deceived man who finds out too late and cries in the corners. No. They wouldn't get away with it. That night would not end as they planned. Their mask would fall. But not there. Not at that table full of hypocrisy and fake smiles. I needed something bigger. Something that would make them feel exactly what I was feeling. Not just the pain, but the shame. Not just betrayal, but despair. And when I was done, they would wish they had never played with me. Because what comes after betrayal, oh, what comes after is something no one ever forgets. Welcome to the channel where the truth about betrayal is revealed without filters. Here, we do not and will never support treason. The stories are fictional, but the pain, humiliation and consequences are real. Because betrayal isn't just a failure, it destroys homes, breaks hearts and changes lives forever. Get ready for a shocking story, full of twists and intense emotions. Listen carefully, because in the end, no one comes out unscathed. The night gently descended over the city as the last rays of sunlight were lost among the skyscrapers. That year's company dinner promised to be grand, a formal event to celebrate the successes achieved, renew professional alliances and, as always, reinforce the image of unity and prestige. He adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, observing his own reflection with a mixture of pride and tiredness. Years of dedication, countless overtime, silent sacrifices and sleepless nights had led him there. Partners, directors, investors, everyone would be present that night to recognize the achievements of the best, and he was one of the main names at that table. He ran his hands through his dark hair, trying to dispel the weight of his thoughts. By your side, Emily finished getting ready. She was always impeccable when it came to events like this, with a natural elegance that made anyone look away. A black dress with a refined cut molded her silhouette perfectly, her golden hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders and the delicate perfume spread throughout the room. Ethan looked at her for a few seconds, feeling a pang of nostalgia. 10 years of marriage, a story built on solid foundations, shared dreams and a love that, despite the challenges of time, seemed unshakable. Or at least that's what he wanted to believe. Their relationship started intensely. He, a promising young man in the corporate world, disciplined, ambitious, always looking for something bigger. She is radiant, spontaneous, with a captivating way of making everything around her lighter. In the beginning, differences were fuel for passion. Ethan admired her for her way of seeing life without so many constraints, for the way she managed to find beauty in the little things. Emily, in turn, saw him as a safe haven, a man who knew what he wanted and who never hesitated in building a stable future for them both. Over time, however, the demands of professional life imposed their own challenges. Ethan became more and more involved with his work, and Emily, although she understood, felt his absence in the moments that mattered most. She never complained openly, but small expressions of discontent appeared in the prolonged silences, in the averted glances, in the nights when they slept without even exchanging a caress. The love was still there, but something was starting to get lost in the routine. That night, however, they were there, together, as always. Ethan took Emily's hand before they left the house and squeezed it lightly, a simple gesture, but full of meaning. She smiled, but there was something different in her eyes, something he couldn't decipher right away. On the way to the event, the car glided smoothly through the city's bright streets. Inside the vehicle, silence settled between them. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but it wasn't comfortable either. Emily was fiddling with her cell phone, and Ethan kept his eyes on the road, immersed in his own thoughts. That night's event meant a lot to him, not only because he was one of those honored, but because it was an opportunity to further consolidate his position within the company. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the sophisticated atmosphere of the main hall. Imposing chandeliers hung from the ceiling, illuminating the impeccably set tables with a golden glow. Waiters circulated among the guests, serving refined drinks, while conversations echoed in a tone of enthusiasm and celebration. Ethan greeted colleagues and superiors, while Emily moved naturally through the space, interacting with acquaintances and exchanging kind smiles. At a certain point, he observed his wife talking to a group further away. Her laugh sounded melodious, her posture relaxed, her eyes sparkling in a peculiar way. Ethan noticed how some people looked at her, admiringly, as if her presence brought a kind of natural magnetism. It was always like this. From the beginning, Emily effortlessly attracted attention, without the need for elaborate words or exaggerated gestures. She simply knew how to be there, in that space, as if she always belonged there. Dinner was served, the speeches began, and Ethan found himself absorbed in a long conversation with one of the company's directors. They talked about new projects, future strategies, growth opportunities. Time passed without him noticing. It was only when the toast was proposed that he turned his attention to Emily. She was a few meters away from him, her eyes fixed on someone in front of her. The smile on his lips was discreet, but his fingers slid gently over a small open box. Ethan frowned. An alliance. Small, elegant, resting inside that velvety box. His breathing faltered for a moment. That didn't make sense. Emily held her with a mix of surprise and hesitation, while the person in front of her smiled, waiting for her reaction. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest, but he remained still. Reason screamed for him not to react, not there, not like that. Just watched. Analyzed. Waited. Emily closed the box gently and took a quick look around. For a split second, her eyes met his. There was a flash of something he couldn't interpret. Blame. Despair. Or something worse, a silent acceptance of whatever was happening. He didn't look away. Emily hesitated. Then, smiled. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Something was wrong. And he needed to find out what. Ethan didn't look away from Emily. Her smile, the one that should have been his, the one that so often calmed him on difficult days, now carried something strange, something out of place. He wanted to believe it was a mistake, an unimportant joke, one of those situations that seemed like something they weren't. But the way she held that little box, the subtle sparkle in her eyes, the hesitation before closing it, everything was wrong. He took a deep breath, trying to hold on to any shred of rationality he had left, but his stomach had already closed in an impossible knot to untie. Not there, not that night. The conversation around him continued to flow, toasts echoed throughout the room, and he forced himself to maintain his composure. He raised his wine glass, lightly touched the crystal in the glass of the colleague next to him, but he didn't even taste the drink when he brought it to his lips. His eyes returned to searching for Emily. She was no longer there. He looked around, scanning the room with his eyes, his chest heavy. He found her near the side exit, talking to someone. A man. He forced himself to keep his pace steady, without seeming anxious or hasty. He walked to a strategic point where he could see without being noticed. The man, a little taller than him, well-aligned hair, an impeccable suit. The kind of presence that was noticeable. Ethan has never seen him before at any of the company meetings, nor at past events. An unknown. But for Emily, no. She smiled, tilted her face slightly as he spoke, and her posture was different. It was the same posture that was once his alone. The box with the ring disappeared. The man held her wrist subtly, his thumb slowly sliding across her skin. She didn't move away. He didn't deny it. Time stopped for Ethan. The air became thick around them, the voices dissolved, and all that was left was that image. Emily, his wife. Emily, the woman he thought he knew, allowing another man to touch her with a silent, meaningful intimacy. His heart was pounding, each beat seemed louder than the last. He wanted to act, he wanted to interrupt, but something held him back. The instinct. If he made a scene there, what would he gain? All eyes on him, a public humiliation, a purposeless outburst of anger. No. It wouldn't be like that. He needed to understand, needed to be sure. The pain was unbearable, a poison burning in every muscle in his body, but he forced himself to move away. The minutes passed slowly and slowly. Ethan tried to have a trivial conversation with one of the company's partners. He tried to pretend that nothing was happening, but all he saw was the image of Emily and that man echoing in his mind. When he no longer found her in the salon, he knew he needed to act. Where was she? He followed the corridor that led to the reserved lounge. I didn't want to believe that she had gone out with that man. Let it just be a conversation. But then, as he rounded the corner and stopped in front of the half-open door of a private room, he saw it. Emily was inside. The lights are lower, the environment is reduced to the silence of a forbidden confidence. The man held your face in his hands, his fingers sliding across your skin. She didn't back down. Ethan's chest heaved with anger, but the disappointment cut deeper than the anger. He wanted to scream, he wanted to confront her right there, he wanted to pull her out of that environment and demand explanations. But he couldn't. His own body betrayed him, leaving him immobile, forcing him to just stare. And then it happened. His lips touched hers. It was subtle, a slow touch, an unhurried kiss, as if it had happened before. As if it weren't the first time. And Emily, she reciprocated. Ethan felt something inside him break beyond repair. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an impulse. It was real. And everything he knew, everything he believed about his marriage, turned to dust. He stood there, still, absorbing every second of what he saw. I didn't want to keep looking, but I also couldn't look away. And then, the moment Emily pulled away the slightest bit from the kiss, as if remembering something, she looked down the hall. He looked directly at him. The shock on her face was instantaneous. The body stiffened, breathing failed. For a second, he seemed incapable of any reaction. But Ethan? He just stood there. Looking. Without saying a word. Without showing anything other than the cold and heavy look that carried all the pain of a man who saw the love of his life transform into someone unrecognizable. Emily opened her mouth to say something, but he turned away before any words could be said. He left without haste, but each step was a blow, a cruel reminder of the betrayal that was now a fact. A truth he could never erase. But it wouldn't end there. He already knew what he needed to do. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Emily's face, the scene she witnessed, the way she didn't back down, everything swirled in his mind like an endless storm. He had been betrayed, humiliated, but worse than that, he felt there was something more. Something bigger than a simple case. The ring, the looks, the way that man felt comfortable touching her, as if that relationship was old, consolidated. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a sham built before his eyes. He spent the next few hours in silence, sitting in the dark of his home office, with an untouched glass at his side. He didn't want to lose himself in alcohol, he didn't want the pain to turn into drunkenness. He needed clarity, answers, something that wouldn't leave him trapped in the overwhelming feeling that his life had been one big theater, and he, the main clown. Emily arrived late. He heard the sound of the key turning in the lock, the cautious footsteps down the hall. She hesitated before entering the room, but entered. Your eyes said it all. She knew that he knew. Emily tried to speak, but Ethan held up a hand, silencing any attempt at an apology. He stood up slowly, his expression filled with a dangerous calm. He didn't want shouting, he didn't want empty arguments, he wanted the truth. She tried to get closer, but he took a step back. The distance between them has never felt so real. She swallowed hard, looked away, but he didn't look away from his. He wanted to see her tremble, wanted her to feel at least a fragment of what he was feeling. His voice was low, controlled, but filled with something that burned more than any fury. How long has it been? Emily hesitated, opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the floor, at her hands, and then whispered something he couldn't hear. He took a step forward, forcing her to face him. She took a deep breath. Almost a year. 1 year. Ethan blinked a few times, trying to absorb the information. A whole year of lies, of excuses, of empty kisses, of fake dinners, of nights when she said she was tired, of moments when he thought everything was just the natural wear and tear of marriage. 1 year. Pain shot through his chest like a blade. But it wasn't just that. He felt there was still something more. The way Emily didn't cry, the way she didn't beg, the way she didn't try to justify it with desperate words. And then, he understood. The alliance. The fucking ring. If this was just a passing fling, why a ring? Why that symbolic gesture? Ethan felt a cold shiver run up his spine. His voice was even quieter now, almost a whisper. Do you love him? Emily didn't respond right away. But when he did, the truth hit him like broken glass. I don't know. And it was at that moment that Ethan knew that nothing else could be saved. The anger disappeared. The hate dissolved. What remained was just an overwhelming silence. He looked at Emily for a long time, waiting for her to say something more, to retract it, to correct her answer, but she didn't. And that's when her phone vibrated. Emily's gaze fell on the device on the table. His face lost color. An involuntary reflex made her try to catch it before Ethan could see, but he already knew. He grabbed his cell phone before she did. The name on the screen was his. That man. The lover. Liam. Ethan took a deep breath before answering. The silence on the line was deafening. And then, the other man's voice echoed from the other side. Emily. Ethan clutched his cell phone between his fingers, closed his eyes for a second, and then spoke, with frightening calm. She can't answer now. On the other end of the line, Liam was silent for a few moments. But then, he laughed. A low, unhurried laugh, as if everything was already resolved. And it was there that Ethan knew there was more, much more than just betrayal. The truth had not yet been fully revealed. The silence that followed that laugh was suffocating. Ethan felt his stomach tighten, his muscles tense, his blood pumping hard in his neck. Liam didn't seem surprised. It didn't even look uncomfortable. It was as if he had been waiting for that moment to come. On the other end of the line, his voice sounded again, slurred, carrying a tone that made Ethan's blood run cold. Well, I guess we don't have to pretend anymore, do we? Emily took a step forward, eyes wide, and reached out to try to grab her cell phone, but Ethan pulled away. He wanted to hear. I needed to hear it. Liam sighed, and when he spoke again, his tone was almost amused. I think it's time to put everything on the table, Ethan. Emily covered her mouth with her hands but said nothing. She didn't deny it, she didn't scream, she didn't beg him to hang up. And it was at that moment, at that very moment, that Ethan realized that she already knew what was coming. It wasn't just a case. It wasn't just a betrayal hidden between excuses and discreet meetings. It was something bigger. Something that she allowed it to happen for too long. And then Liam spoke again, and this time each word was like a punch, shattering any illusion Ethan might have held. Do you really think this marriage still existed? The ground seemed to disappear beneath Ethan's feet. Emily lowered her head, as if that were a silent confirmation of everything. His fingers gripped his cell phone tightly, his jaw clenched, his breathing heavy. What do you mean by that? Liam laughed again, but now there was a certain disdain in his voice. I mean you were the last one to notice, Ethan. This marriage ended a long time ago. Emily and I, we're already together. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment. The words echoed in his mind, resonating in every corner of his chest, but he didn't react immediately. He waited. I wanted to see how far it would go. Emily finally moved, tugging at the collar of her own dress, trying to breathe. But there was no more air in that house. There was no more room for any lies. Liam continued, mercilessly, like someone who has already won the war and now just enjoys the wreckage. You know why I gave her the ring that night, don't you? Ethan swallowed. You knew. But I needed to hear it from him. The answer came slowly, cruelly. Because I asked her to marry me. The impact of those words was brutal. Ethan looked at Emily, waiting for her to deny it, waiting for her to say it was a mistake, that this was all a big mistake. But she didn't say anything. He felt the weight of betrayal shift into something greater. Emily didn't just cheat on him. She had already replaced him. And Liam wasn't done yet. She was just waiting for the right time to tell you, but I think you deserve to know now. Ethan held the phone for a few more seconds, feeling a lump form in his throat. When he finally responded, his voice was low, firm, dangerous. The right time. He laughed humorlessly, running his tongue across his dry lips. And when exactly would that moment be? Emily closed her eyes. Liam took a second before responding. After your celebratory dinner. After you got your promotion, after everything was safe for her. Safe for her. The words coiled in Ethan's mind like poison. She was waiting for him to consolidate everything. Hoping he would secure the financial future, hoping he would do all the heavy lifting before simply throw it away. He looked at Emily and felt something he had never felt before. Unpleasant. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Ethan, But he raised his hand again, cutting off any attempt. You were going to leave me after I guaranteed your financial security. Is that it? Emily closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, but didn't deny. And it was there, at that moment, which Ethan knew that there was nothing left to be saved. With eerie calm, he brought the cell phone back to his ear. You can have it, Liam. The other man did not expect this. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, but then Liam laughed. That was easier than I expected. Ethan smiled. But it wasn't an ordinary smile. It was a smile that carried something deeper, darker. Enjoy it while you can. And then he hung up. Emily looked at him, waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to scream, to beg, to do something. But Ethan didn't do any of that. He just took a step back, looked at her one last time, and then it went out. Because that was the last time she would see him like that. Ethan left the house without looking back. Every step he took seemed to carry an invisible weight, as if his own body refused to accept that it was happening. The night air was cold, but he didn't feel it. There was no sensation anymore, just a suffocating emptiness. His chest burned, not with anger, but with something worse. Deception. It wasn't just about the betrayal, nor about the time he had been deceived. It was the fact that he had been used, reduced to a pawn in a game he didn't know was being played. He drove aimlessly for hours. The steering wheel squeezed between your fingers, the headlights cutting through the dark path. The surrounding city passed by in a blur. It didn't matter where he was going. What mattered was getting away. In the silence of the car, his mind echoed every word spoken that night. Liam's words, full of certainty, loaded with the arrogance of someone who already felt victorious. Emily's look, without denial, without struggle, as if she knew there were no more arguments to support the lie. She was ready to leave him, but only at the right time. And the right time would be when he had already given her everything. He laughed. A dry, lifeless laugh. How naive it was. How he allowed that to happen right before his eyes without realizing it. How he spent so much time with a woman who wouldn't hesitate to discard him as soon as another opportunity presented itself. But something inside him, a part that was still trying to rationalize, wanted to understand. When did she stop loving him? Or have you never loved? The night passed slowly. The sky began to lighten, staining the horizon with orange tones. Ethan stopped the car near a small, out-of-the-way lookout point, where he often went when he needed to think. He stood there, watching the sun rise, feeling tiredness weighing down his shoulders. But what weighed most heavily was the feeling that his entire life had been a lie. He had built a future for a marriage that no longer existed. He picked up his cell phone and saw dozens of missed calls from Emily. Didn't answer. There was nothing more to say. The phone vibrated again. He stared at the screen, hoping it was another attempt on her part, but it wasn't. It was an unknown number. He answered without thinking. The voice on the other end came low, hesitant. Ethan. So you. Claire. He frowned. I hadn't heard that voice for a long time. Claire, a colleague at the company, someone he has always had a good relationship with, but never beyond that. Why was she calling now? The pause on the other end of the line made his stomach drop. There was something wrong. Ethan. I know this isn't the best time, but I couldn't stay silent. I need to tell you something about Liam. The name was like a blow. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment before responding. What about him? Claire took a deep breath before speaking. He's not who you think. And Emily, she doesn't know what she's doing. Her words made his heart race. Like this? And that's when Claire started to tell everything. Liam wasn't just a man who got involved with Emily. He was much more than that. He was calculating. He did this often. He seduced married women, approached them at the right time, gained their trust and made them believe that they were safe by his side. And then, when everything was aligned, he destroyed them. Ethan wasn't the first husband to be cheated on by him. Shock ran through his body like lightning. He tried to take in every detail, but his mind refused to process it all at once. Are you sure what you're saying? Claire didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Liam has been doing this for years. He approaches women who are already emotionally fragile, takes advantage of their vulnerability and convinces them that he is the best choice. When they finally leave everything behind, when they lose everything for him, he just disappears. He disappears and leaves them with nothing. He doesn't want Emily. He just wants to watch her destroy everything she has. Ethan fell silent, feeling the weight of the revelation. Emily was being manipulated. And she fell into the trap without even realizing it. And then it all made sense. Liam's confidence on the phone. The way he laughed, as if he already knew exactly what would happen next. He was expecting Ethan to react predictably. That he exploded, that he revolted, that he took impulsive action. But now Ethan knew the truth. And I knew that I wouldn't react as Liam expected. He thanked Claire for the call, hung up the phone, and stared at the horizon for a few more minutes. If Liam wanted to destroy Emily, he would have to get through Ethan first. But this time, it would be Ethan who would pull the strings. Ethan hung up the phone and stared at the horizon for a long time. The sun had already risen completely, but inside it there was still darkness. Claire's revelation changed everything. Emily was not just an unfaithful woman, but a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Liam chose her, he knew exactly how to act, how to fill the gaps that he, Ethan, had left with his obsession with work, his increasingly constant absences. But he didn't want her. He wanted to watch it burn. A bitter irony formed in his mind. Emily had convinced herself that Liam was the answer to everything she was missing in her life, but she never realized that she was just one among many others. He could see the pattern now. Liam manipulated, seduced, left a trail of destruction and disappeared before anyone could realize what really happened. But Ethan noticed. And now he had something Liam hadn't expected, information. He picked up his cell phone again and looked at Emily's dozens of missed calls. She wanted to talk to him. Probably not because I felt guilty, but because I knew he didn't react as expected. She was expecting an explosion, blind revenge, but all she got was silence. He smiled. Silence was scarier than screams. Without thinking twice, he dialed her number. The phone barely rang twice before Emily answered. His breathing was rapid. She was waiting for that call. "Ethan, please, listen to me. Let me explain." Her voice trembled, but he no longer felt anything but a meticulous coldness. "Explain what, Emily?" I didn't want it to be like this. I never planned on hurting you." Ethan laughed lowly. "Of course not. You only planned to leave me when it was most convenient. After I ensured your financial security. After you were sure you wouldn't be left destitute." Emily was silent for a moment, then whispered. "It's not like that." He felt the anger wanting to rise, but he controlled it. "I know everything, Emily. I know what Liam does. I know he's done it before. I know you were just another one he chose." The silence on the other side was deafening. She didn't know. And then, her despair came. "What are you saying? What are you talking about?" Ethan took a deep breath. "He's not going to be with you. He's never been with any of them." She was left breathless. "You're lying." "No, Emily. You were the one who believed a lie." He heard her breathing become ragged. The penny was dropping. "I don't believe it. He loves me." Ethan laughed again, but this time with pity. "Then why didn't he ever tell you about the others?" Emily didn't respond. She already knew the truth. But I still couldn't accept it. He decided to play the last trick. "Ask him, Emily. Ask him what happened to the women before you. Ask him how they ended up. Ask him why he never stayed with any of them after they destroyed their marriages. Ask him if he really intends to marry you." The crying on the other side came loudly. Ethan listened without saying anything. I no longer felt hate. I only felt bitter satisfaction in seeing reality finally catching up with Emily. After a while, her voice came weak, almost lifeless. What do I do? He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the taste of victory. That's not my problem. And then he hung up. Emily was destroyed. And Liam, he would be next. The day dawned differently for Ethan. The feeling of emptiness that had accompanied him in the last few hours was now giving way to something new, something he hadn't felt in a long time: control. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, he didn't feel like the deceived man, the fool who believed in a non-existent love. He was now the only one who had the power, who knew the truth, who dictated the rules. Emily didn't call again. She didn't need to. Reality had already crushed all the illusions she carried about Liam. But Ethan knew it wouldn't end there. Liam was too proud to let it all end without some pathetic attempt to reassert his control. And he was right. Late in the afternoon, while I was reviewing some work documents, the phone rang. Liam's name flashed on the screen. Ethan let it ring a few times before answering. There was no anger in his voice, just the calmness of someone who had already won. "So, Liam, have you given up on theater?" Liam laughed on the other side, but this time there was no confidence in his voice. It was the forced laugh of someone who knows they have been discovered. "Did she tell you?" Ethan didn't need to ask what he was talking about. Emily finally confronted the truth. "I didn't need to. I already knew." The silence on the other side was long. "Liam, for the first time, I didn't know what to say. She's a wreck." His voice was lower now, almost irritated. "You got what you wanted. But don't think that changes anything." Ethan smiled. "No, Liam. This changes everything." Liam sighed, trying to regain control. "I've always come out on top, Ethan. You think you're the first husband who tries to defeat me? In the end, everyone goes down alone." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, savoring every word. "You may have escaped before. But now everyone knows who you are. Claire told the wife of the last man you destroyed. And she told the other one. And the other one. All the women you deceived know now that they weren't the only ones. They know you never wanted any of them." Liam's breath hitched. He didn't expect this. "You're lying." Ethan laughed, but there was no humor there. "Then try calling one of them and see if anyone answers." The silence was deafening. Liam had spent years manipulating women, playing a game where he always got away with it. But now, everyone knew the truth. He was not a mysterious, irresistible seducer. He was just a pathetic man who thrived on the destruction of others. The call ended without goodbyes. Ethan knew Liam was finished. As for Emily, he learned from Claire that she didn't show up for work that day. He was probably still trying to understand how it all fell apart so quickly. But it wasn't his problem anymore. The following week, Ethan signed the divorce papers without even blinking. There were no fights, there were no arguments. The only thing he asked was for her to leave the house. He didn't want the furniture, he didn't want the memories. "I wanted a fresh start." Emily, for her part, didn't beg. She knew she had lost everything. Your marriage, your stability, and worse, his own dignity. She fell into Liam's trap thinking she was in control, thinking she had found something better, only to discover that it was just another name on his list. She tried calling a few times, perhaps hoping there was still some chance of fixing what she did. Ethan never answered. Time passed. It didn't take long for Liam's reputation to completely crumble. Not only did he lose his credibility among the women he deceived, but he also saw his career crumble when rumors of his manipulation spread. The man who thought he was untouchable now had nowhere to run. Emily, without Liam, without Ethan, without her life planned, had to deal with the weight of her own choices. She was sometimes seen alone, lost in thought, like someone who finally understood too late what she had lost. And Ethan? He moved on. In the midst of the chaos, he found something he never expected to find so quickly: peace. For the first time in years, he could breathe without feeling the weight of a relationship based on lies. And maybe, at some point, he allowed himself to love again. Because, in the end, betrayal can destroy a marriage. But it doesn't destroy those who know how to start over. If you made it this far, comment what you thought of this story. Your opinion is very important to us. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Here, we do not support treason in any form. After all, whoever cheats will one day pay the price.